Alright. Guys, we're gonna do something a little different today. Feeling, you know, like the last couple videos I thought were really good, and like getting into the strategy and some of my tactics and things like that, and that's great. I just want to kind of tangent a little bit and get into some more kind of hardcore, deeper thoughts. And I came across some content that I wrote down. I don't know, probably while I was snowed in like 2 winters ago or something like that. Um, just because, like, I studied the game for so long and all my experiences and the teams, I just, while it was sort of fresh, wanted to write down some things. So I'm just gonna pull up some stuff and you guys kick back, get some popcorn or something. I actually have this kind of divided out a little bit. So some of it's rambling, some of it's focused on team building, trying hard. So let's start in that order. All right. Forward to all the writers out there who can articulate, edit, and represent content well, please don't let my ramblings insult you. This creative content is expressed with the intent of getting it out there. Apologies for my blunt observations and random transitions. Okay, so where to start? I'm making an observation about CS today and the quote noobs back in the day when I started playing competitive in 1.5. I was a noob. Thus, was not defined by my age. I was not a teenager, as many players of the time were older, in their 30s and 40s. Some were young, 14 to 15. My status was based on when I came into the game. Regardless of my skill level, my knowledge in the game could only extend to what I could gather from the existing players, much of whom were original 1.3 players. Pardon me. At this point in the game, most of the community fell into the later category, and most were programmers and people working in the tech industry or dedicated computer geeks. Needless to say, they set the bar very high as far as understanding technology and gaming. Y'all have heard the term noob. As a student of Counter-Strike, I have always put myself in that category. As the game evolved, I adapted as the best player I could, who endured several major adaptations in the game, including the death of 1.5, 1.6, and Counter-Strike Source. Eventually, the majority of original players from 1.3 moved on from the game, as many would be well into adulthood by now. We called them dinosaurs. That I would consider myself a veteran player, as I never took a break and played out subsequent versions of the game. Now, noobs running around the map, you're picking, you're clutching, you're lurking, you're entry fragging, you know your weapons, and experiment with the spray and the gameplay, but are you talking? You don't have to be a shoutcaster and verbalize everything that is happening play by play. Even basic communication can be worlds more effective than any of your amazing plays. If you're in a pug 5v5, like it's a scrim with your team. If you're not going to at least humor some of the players on your team and get an overall census of what your team can do and cannot do, then you may as well just deathmatch. So many players think that you have to be clutching frags to be a solid player. The fact is, you can be 1 in 14 and be doing mad work for your team, setting them up for plays and getting your team rounds. The competitive version of Counter-Strike is a 5-man team. There is no individual players. There are no stats. None of what matters if you get the dub as a team. That said, it's a whirlwind, downward spiral for many teams trying to figure out why they are not winning, and many efforts can pretty much make the situation a lot worse. If you're just blanket critical about specifics in the game, there are far too many factors to pin it down to one player, one play, or one smoke. I will get more into that, but let me just restate. If your team is winning using strats, skill, or sheer momentum, don't fix what isn't broken. A team with strategy and teamwork can beat a team with much better greater aim and skill. This is what the upsets around the globe are about, and a big part of why I love Counter-Strike. You're playing against the best aim, the fastest shooters in the game. Easy solution: don't peek. Unless they can see through walls, they can't shoot what they don't see. I have always helped teach other players the wealth of information, as I was so lucky to receive by players who were not always the most vocal. I spent time, hours, days, even weeks stalking people until they would play with me and let me pick their brain. Okay, so playing open and with new teams, you could say, is my specialty, as I've done it so many times that I can count on both hands. I have no objection to new players. That said, my observation about noobs is, as it was with the dinosaurs, who often were very hard on new players and meant to inspire them and to simply do more in the game. I want you to see the bigger picture, as it were, and realize that it's not the game mechanics and muscle memory. There is a much deeper level of the game that depends on creativity and being able to utilize every second by using teamwork and communication. Here's where I will admit, in the past, I had stacks of scrapbooks and sticky notes and binders full of processes used for organizing that include a great amount of psychology. Somewhere in there, I made an actual formula for creating cohesion, which I think I made a YouTube video on already. This would be a pretty advanced, as most top teams don't always possess this aspect. First, you bond your team, then you open up comms, then you build trust and coordination. To have cohesion, your team is essentially in the zone, working all as one mind. Through my years of playing CS, I never understood how it seemed like there were less comms the better teams I played with, and the more what could be described as telepathy, or body language, as we would call in the game. The gameplay was more basic, but what I learned when I learned complexity, the more complicated things became. To a certain extent, ignorance can be bliss. The less you know, the less you hesitate to react. Sometimes randomly you may encounter this in a type of match or game, what I call the dream team. It can be complete strangers, new or older players. It's just something about the chemistry that is just right. It's not about how much you like the players or your play styles. It's just a mentality. And in the older versions of the game, there was a dominant perspective of the game. And so this match up was more common, I suspect. A dream team is fictional because no one team could produce consistency using ESP alone. Haha. But it happens. It is unexplainable. Okay, so back to basics. Now, I have given you an idea of what the goal is. Not to learn everything, but to learn enough to figure out what works for your team. Your team is the other 4 players in the server. Strangers or friends, it doesn't matter. If you want to find a level that works to get your team rounds and win, this is obviously more challenging with a pug or a ringer that can make it a good opportunity to practice. I think that works both ways. It's like, in some ways it's more challenging on a team because, like, when you make those deeper connections, it's a lot harder to tell someone, look, you're fucking blowing dick. Or like, replace this motherfucker, like that. Where do you draw the line? Again, one is dedication and having dedication, loyalty to your teammates. But on the other hand, if someone's like really bringing the team down, if it's like something going on in real life and whatever, I'm not going to get on a tangent of that, but maybe you would ask them to like take a time out for a little bit, go travel the world or something. I don't know. All right, this is a good opportunity to practice. If you're not trying, then you're just being a noob. The goal is to try until it just happens without trying. In the meta of Counter-Strike, irony is deep. Oftentimes, people who have no investment in the results will get the stats and wins because they have nothing to lose. No investment. You will never hear me emphasize more on how important it is taking risk and experimenting. The goal is to get that level of detachment from the end game in order to get the results. So like, even with your team, like I said, don't let them in your head, because you want to be at this level of detachment. Fake it until you make it, as it goes, to make it look effortless and even random while maintaining integrity and dedication to your team and the game. For organization purposes, I will start with how to improve an existing team or newly formed team, and if I need to backtrack later and talk about how to make teams and join teams as a prequel. Roles. Alright, everyone talks about roles. I'm looking to see, I can't tell how long this video is already, but everyone talks about roles. This term is used in a different way for other games, and it might make it a bit confusing. Because Counter-Strike is a fairly basic game, it grows ever so much more complex than a game equipped with loads of stimulation and pre-existing rules. The gravity is the same on all the maps, and the less factors there are in the game, the more the game is reliant on what the players do. Where you play and who you play with being pretty much the largest factor you can imagine. It's not like you're going to suddenly get more damage with your rifle. No magic mushrooms to make you grow bigger or smaller. Random factors are players and spots. There are no set roles for Counter-Strike. To be a good Counter-Strike player, you need to understand and be able to play all of the rules. All of the roles. Not all at one time. And it's best to focus on one at a time and to be able to master them and figure out which you're most confident playing and eventually what roles your team needs from you as a player. This last part is key, as each team is different and a player's talent would be best utilized playing one role on a team and an entirely different role on another team. Unless you build a team around a player. And then it's not the players, it's not this players... it's hard to read this, it's all typed out on unless you build a team around a player and then it's not this player's the best at everything and so we need 4 players to fill in the other roles. It's this player is so much in their groove playing a certain role for a team that the other players need to adapt and utilize that key play or that key player's role and get those key plays and rounds and build their strategy around that. In most situations, all of the players will be filling in this role at different times. Otherwise, teams would simply target a player and shut down the game, right? Like if you had one skilled player on your team and everybody else was like support or whatever, they would just go after that. They go after the carry guy and just shut him down. And which actually reminds me, I was just fucking in a pug, Face It premium pug the other day, arguing with some fucking noob about the fact that they were wanting to play back more, and it was like been round after round after round, CT side on train, that they're just letting this guy balls out with his op, come out, running out T-Con and just shitting on the entire fucking team. Like, then the rest of the team would run B, and my whole team was just like, whoa, doing nothing, and like, I'm like telling them to push up, push up, push up. Like, everybody stack this spot and shut down this fucking player, because it doesn't matter what the rest of the team is doing. If you're letting this guy do this, you know, it's disrupting our whole setup, and we're not able to like retake or like do other things. So oh my god, this just keeps on going and going and going. Alright. So they would just push that player and shut down the game. So you have to be random and consistently random in order to accomplish this. Players fill these roles differently on different maps and subsequently learn firsthand what it is like being in the position, literally that role. Your mindset, literally what you're doing, what you think you're doing. What you're doing, what you think you're doing, what you're doing, and what your team thinks you're doing should be relatively consistent. Here you start to build a mainframe for a unified harmony or a mentality that is ultimately one functioning unit that executes seamlessly. The creative element being the conceptual nature and the skill being in manifesting that into something that reflects its original design. Like trying to draw a picture of something and it never looks the way you wanted it to on the first try. And for some, it never will after endless tries. There is an inherent perspective or an instinct that a player can build and grow, always improve, but the nature of their style is sort of underlying, permeating when opportunity arises. That said, general roles include In-game leader, IGL strat caller. Sometimes there is another mid-round leader that helps break down the strat initially or gain efficiency during the round. Essentially, they can change the plan mid-round based on multiple factors. The IGL is responsible for making sure everyone is understanding their job and conflict resolution when the prime directive fails. To be a good leader, you don't have to be the most vocal or the most experienced. You need to be the most patient and the most creative. Listen and know your players' goals and fears. And when the opportunity arises, use that information to be opportunistic and resolve problems. Don't let their fears become your own, and maintain a healthy boundary between being organized and prepared and overthinking, overanalyzing. Let bonds form naturally. Nurture those bonds, but don't force it, quote unquote. Lurker. This is a critical role, and I start with it because many teams start with entry fraggers and leave the lurking to the weakest or less informed player, and that is a huge mistake. A passive player is attempting to not be seen in the game while holding angles that will give them time to fall back and call if the enemy decides to push or flank. This requires a huge amount of knowledge and experience in the game. Most of all, timing. Knowing when to flash, how to dip out of a situation, when exposing your team, and this also requires precise communication, which is something I think a lot of people look over. They think that the lurker is just a person that gets lucky at times and rotates when and how they please. The lurker is the most independent player on the team and therefore is the most restricted player, as they don't have the freedom to make random plays. This is the position you call everything. You call what you don't hear. You don't just rotate when you please and oh no, you just call before you do anything. You call, you don't just rotate when you please, oh no, period. You call before you do anything. And you let your team know first, not as it's happening, but before. Okay? I'm like spitting all over myself. It's a good thing you guys can't see this, okay? Alright, support player. Often confused with passive playstyle, support players come in all shapes and sizes. Some are very aggressive and vocal, and many times will flip from being an entry fragger to being entry fagger. That's a good one. To being support, to the aggro players, bait out nades and set up the plays. Alright, an entry fragger, sometimes called impact player because they're astute in knowledge of the map, timing, and teamwork, they can set up game-changing scenarios, drawing fire away from the posted players, quote unquote, baiting out players and nades, and generally getting information to feed the IGL or the MRL, mid-round leader. A team will usually have 2 support rifles, an IGL, an MRP, and a lurker. Some teams, IGL is the mid-round player, sometimes IGL is the mid-round player, so entry fragger, that's not what I meant, okay. I don't know what that has to do with, or with this a while ago. So, what I think I'm trying to say here is that some teams don't have a mid-round leader, that their IGL is also the mid-round leader. But the problem with that is if your IGL dies, then there's nobody alive to regroup the team. So usually that's why you have a secondary leader, a mid-round leader. Okay, we're getting toward the end here. This is great. Fantastic. So I'll just gonna read the words that are here. A team will usually have 2 support rifle, IGL, MRP, and a lurker. Some teams IGL is the mid-round player. So, entry fragger. Crudely, you have 2 pairs of entry support players carrying rifles or a rifle and an op, and an independent player or lurker. These roles can often be played with any combination of playstyles as follows. Offensive, passive player. So, you may So while you may seem to be chilling and just watching the flank, you're really in a most proactive position. So while you're playing passive doesn't mean you're a downy, quite the opposite. You're playing independently, and as a team player, you're on the other side of the map from your team, often in closed off spaces, trying to keep pace with what's going on. If your timing sucks, you're a wasted space, and your team may as well have 4 players. A passive play CT side would be hanging outside B site on D2 playing retake. Retake means you plan on retaking the site once the other team is going for the plant. The key here is that you're planning on giving up critical territory on the map with a plan to retake with your team or pinch them once they are in the site. To play the spot properly, you need to be able to utilize smokes and flashes to give your team time to rotate. You can't just hide and let them run into the site. Passive doesn't mean camp. You're throwing smokes. You're in the chokehold, and you're banking flashes from your safe position as you are either alive when your team makes it around the map, or you're just eliminated. If you succeed at everything I just said and die when most of the team floods in the site and your team is in position, then you served your role well. You are an acceptable loss at that point. If your team overexposed themselves in more aggressive positions and took damage, that's not your fault. Aggressive and passive aggressive styles have to know at what time it is okay for them to expose themselves, and in any case, this would be when they are sure the majority of the enemy is engaging them in their spot. So, if the terrorists should send 3 players to B and 2 long A, and the players long should play back enough to be able to rotate and retake the B site. So basically what I'm saying is if you have a offensive passive player, like a passive CT player, playing in one certain spot on the map, say B site on Dust 2, then the other players who are positioned on the map, like the long A and the cat players, should be aware of how that player is playing, like that they're playing back, and so they are going to either play aggressively or passively based on that. All right? Offensive, aggressive, or the fuck? Didn't I already just say this? Yep. I already said that. Okay, entry fragger. Oh, well, I guess offensive, aggressive, or entry fragger, sometimes called an M. That doesn't make sense. I think I copied a piece of that wrong. Okay, offensive, passive aggressive player, or post. As suggested, this player is both support for entry players, or often called pickers, when they post up in a spot, usually back behind and pick off peekers baited out by the other player, or get trades and call for backup. Many pickers use an op and are good at using... Hold on. Many pickers use an op and are good using a rifle at a distance. Okay. So usually, because most people don't have both those skills. Like, either you're a fantastic rifler and you can shoot across the map with a silenced M4, like I can, or you're a really amazing opper, which I'm not. Like, I'm a okay opper. Like, I can definitely lay down a couple 3Ks here and there or whatever, and, depending on if I'm playing with, like, silvers or whatever, it can seem like I'm fucking amazing with it, but I'm not, because when it comes down to, like, clutch situations, there's, like, easy angles, I will miss. Alright, whereas that doesn't happen long. Anyway, so usually these are the type of skills that will be unique to each player. So, a post player is what I'm talking about, is usually one of these two things. They're usually an opper, where they post up and they're looking for picks with the op, or they are able to post up with a rifle at a long distance, like what a distance and angles that an op would play. Alright, I think that makes sense. I wouldn't put my best rifle in an entry spot. Best defined here by consistency, not aim. So I'm saying, like, I wouldn't put my most consistent rifler in the entry spot. So a post rifler would be in a support position, whereas a more aggressive rifler would be the entry position, or entry lurker, because a lot of times those spots flip. Like I was saying, like with the Lurker, you'll be behind your team, but if your team turns around and decides to go the other way, then all of a sudden you're the entry. So the Lurker and the entry, um, like, and obviously you guys know entry players, impact players are high level players. Like you're like high paced players. You're not the fucking chill ass fucking downy players. So like you need to be able to have both. You can also like you guys have seen some of my gameplay like where sometimes I can just be redonkulously patient and sometimes I'm not. I mean it's something that I've definitely had to work at because being random and aggressive is my instinct. But anyway, so we're getting to the end of this. Some operas can be really aggressive, but the key again here is to keep these players alive as they will be the clutch players. Versatility is critical in every role, but these players need to be very specialized at what they do. They are slower to rotate, they're calm, they're focused, and they tend to have the better aim. So, yeah, so like you think of it like when in like an entry situation, your impact player, like I said, they do all this baiting nades, they're getting information, they're setting the time and the tone for their team, and then they're flashing in and they're running in, they're trying to get picks. If they lay down a 2K, awesome. If they run in and just fucking die, it's the same thing. Like the team, if you have a good team, they should be able to just pick up on that and just shut, like they basically, like I said, if it's the same, if it's, CT side and not T side, and they were able to like hold off the, and set up the team for the retake, again, they've done their job. So, ideally though, they get in and they do some damage, and then so when the other team is retaking or rotating, those are really easy picks. And that, what I'm saying, will escalate the higher levels that you play, because obviously the higher levels you play, the better aim people have. And so, like, if you do like damage to like 2 or 3 players, a really well placed nade might just get someone a 2K or even a 3K. So yeah, I hope these tips and some deep ass fucking shit is helpful for some of you, and let me know in the comments if you like this. Uh, like I got some upcoming content, definitely fairly bit more ranting here, and I'm gonna get back into the game and do some more strategy and things. Let me know if there's any maps or spots you guys have questions with, and like, share, subscribe. You've been looking at my Twitter page here. I have 17 followers on Twitter. Twitter blows though, it's okay. And well, this is my alternate account too, but I'm like, I think we're getting close to 200 subs on YouTube, which is awesome, but I definitely could see that number growing a little faster. It would be awesome too. So share and get your friends to subscribe and like, and also give me comments. All right, there's links on my homepage to my Twitter and the Steam group. All right, thanks. Good game.